throughout this process, and I know that we will be a great partnership going forward. I promised my leadership would be done differently, and it will be. I've communicated with every single member of my party room about this shadow ministry, those who are in the shadow ministry and those who are not. Now, that style might be unconventional, but it's important because I always said that I would harness the talents of my party room. Everyone has a role to play, even if they're not formally in this lineup. And as I said, I've communicated with every member of my party room, all 54, because this is a team that draws on the deep well of the Australian experience. It includes those who've served in uniform, migrants, and the descendants of the oldest continuous culture on earth. There are those who've balanced the books in small businesses and those who've made tough calls in corporate boardrooms. Our team is one of strivers and optimists, of leaders and listeners. We have voices from the city to the bush, people who went to university and those who got a trade. The new Coalition Shadow Ministry balances experience with new talent. It reflects the full range of our philosophical traditions, values and perspectives across our two great party rooms. And this is important because our parties are at their best when they work together to fight right now as a strong opposition for this government. Now, I'm really excited to work with my new economic team. Ted O'Brien as Shadow Treasurer and James Patterson in Finance. Andrew Bragg in a new productivity and deregulation role. This will help develop economy-wide solutions to pressing issues for Australians, including housing. And as Shadow Housing Minister, Andrew will ensure that housing policy is at the heart of our economic agenda. Tim Wilson will be the Shadow Minister for Industrial Relations and Employment, and most importantly, the Shadow Minister for Small Business. Dave Sharma will also join the economic team as the Shadow Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities and Treasury. I'm particularly proud of our Foreign Affairs, National Security and Defence team, which will include Michaelia Cash as Shadow Foreign Minister, Angus Taylor as Shadow Defence Minister, Andrew Hastie as Shadow Home Affairs Minister, and Jason Wood as Shadow Minister for International Development and the Pacific. This is a strong team that knows what it takes to keep Australians safe. As the first woman to take on the Leader of the Opposition role, I'm also very pleased to see a number of capable women advance forward. Nothing is more central to the prosperity of Australians than our safety, so I'm excited to see Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price take on the crucial role of Shadow Minister for Defence Industry and Shadow Minister for Defence Personnel. Karen Little will come into the Shadow Cabinet and serve as Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians and Social Services. Angie Bell will come into the Shadow Cabinet with the Environment and Youth portfolios. Melissa McIntosh will take on the really important Women's portfolio and continue her great work in communications, being a strong voice for the protection of women and children from the failures of big tech. Anne Ruston will serve as the Health, Aged Care and Sport Shadow Minister and will take up the critical NDIS portfolio. And I want to underscore this point. We must ensure the NDIS is sustainable. The government must prioritise this work urgently, and we will hold them accountable for their promises to do so. Melissa Price will join the Shadow Ministry as Shadow Minister for Cyber Security and Shadow Minister for Science. Leah Blythe, Maria Kovacic and Zoe McKenzie will all join the front bench and key Shadow Assistant Ministry roles. These women very much represent the future of our party. This is their first step, but it's far from their last. I'm also very happy to advise that, subject to the outcome of the vote in Bradfield, Giselle Kaptarian will be appointed as Shadow Assistant Minister for Communications, Shadow Assistant Minister for Technology and the Digital Economy. Giselle's appointment is a vote of confidence in the future of women in our party. And it's a clear message to communities like Bradfield that if you support your local Liberal member, they will have a direct say in the decisions that change the direction of this country. Andrew Wallace will take on the key role of Shadow Cabinet Secretary, playing an important policy development and coordination role with this appointment. Dan Tehan will take up the critical energy and emissions reduction portfolio. Dan, working alongside our passionate and talented party room and the Nationals, will lead our work to deliver a plan that gets emissions down but also delivers a reliable grid in energy for Australians. Australia does have to play its part in the global response to climate change, but not at any cost. Dean Smith from the Great Resources State of WA will play a vital role in this plan as the Assistant Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction. Alex Hawke will be the Shadow Minister for Industry and Innovation and Manager of Opposition Business in the House. John O'Duniam will take up education and early learning. He will do the work to deliver a plan for education that gives choices to parents and prioritises knowledge and critical thinking for our kids. Julian Leeser will serve as Shadow Attorney General and Shadow Minister for the Arts. Paul Scarr will bring fresh perspective and a great strategic mind to immigration. My team sees the immigration portfolio as an opportunity that really connects with our economic agenda. Also of note, there is a new urban infrastructure and cities portfolio led by James McGrath. This will ensure we have specific focus on cities when it comes to our policy development.
This is where viewers on ABC TV are leaving us. You can continue watching on the ABC News channel. Bye for now. I held the skills portfolio in the last term as Deputy Leader, and I'm deeply passionate about seeing the next generation of apprentices and trainees thrive. Scott will bring great enthusiasm and be a champion for so much in this sector. Phil Thompson will contribute further to our team as the Shadow Assistant Minister for Defence and also Shadow Assistant Minister for the NDIS. Matt O'Sullivan will serve as Shadow Assistant Minister for Infrastructure as well as Fisheries and Forestry. The Coalition will provide that constructive check and balance this term. And I really look forward to getting out of Canberra and into the communities over the weeks ahead to connect with ordinary Australians, Australians who are doing it tough, and the wonderful, wonderful communities that make up this great country. Over to you, David.
Well, thanks, Susan. And saying that and getting out of here, can I say that my thoughts are with those flood-affected communities, those that I went to on Friday to Kempsey and Maxville, and in fact on Monday back out to Junda in my own electorate that was basically washed away in April. They haven't been forgotten and they're not being forgotten, and I'm heading straight from here back to the flood zone to be with Alison Penfold and Pat Conahan have done an amazing job. And I thank the Prime Minister for going and visiting and making sure they understand that the Australian people are with them and that this will be a recovery journey that we all go on together. And Susan and I will make that commitment about making sure that this is a bipartisan approach and it is important they know that we are focused on them. This morning, our party room made the decision to rejoin the Coalition after, obviously, the party room meeting of the Liberal Party on Friday. And I thank the Liberal Party and the leadership of Susan in getting to that position to make sure there's understanding about the way forward, that the focus now is on Anthony Albanese and the Labor government and holding them to account, because that's important for our democracy. That's important for Australians, that they know we've laid the foundation stones of a coalition that can move forward and work together to ensure that we hold them to account, but also have an alternative government in 3 years. And so this is an important step that we make, and in respect of our changes, there aren't as many, but there are significant ones. We are moving Darren Chester into Veterans Affairs. Senator Ross Cadell will come into Shadow Cabinet, and we'll take over where Perrin Davies, who sadly has lost her spot in the Senate and as Deputy Leader. Ross will come in as the new Water, Fisheries, Forestries and Emergency Services Minister. In fact, he will be with me tomorrow visiting these disaster-affected areas. Anne Webster will be the new Shadow Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Regional Telecommunications. And I'm glad and privileged that Susan is now, for the first time in a long time, bringing one of the Nationals into the economic team. Pat Conahan will be the Assistant Treasurer, Shadow Assistant Treasurer and Shadow Minister for Financial Services. And I think it is important to draw on that diversity. Pat while a lawyer, is also a small business person, one that has great intellect and one that I gave significant credit to and opportunity to in the last parliament, along with Anne, to show their wares and to be able to move forward. And Anne did that with her passion and pride in regional health. And it's important that we continue to harness and nurture the next generation that are coming through, that have the passion and ideas to add to what the Liberal Party will bring to the table. And in terms of Assistant Shadow Ministers, Sam Birrell will become the Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Health and Education. Andrew Wilcox will be the Shadow Assistant Minister for Manufacturing and Sovereign Capability. And Jamie Chaffey, a self-made man. He knocked on over 25,000 doors in the seat of Parkes. This is a man of great conviction, of great work ethic, and it is a man that has led his community as mayor in Gunnedah, but also as the New South Wales Country Mayors Association president, that should be given an opportunity to shine and given an opportunity to come forward as the new Shadow Assistant Minister for Agriculture and Resources. There are changes around making sure that we continually move forward as a party, and I made some of those changes after the last election, and I'm continuing to make that, to make sure that the legacy of our party room isn't just around policy, but it's also about people, about the people that come through to make sure that we have the leaders in the next generation. They'll fly the flag for the National Party. And I'm proud to do that, and to do that with Sussan in such a constructive way. And now it's the time to take on this government and make sure the Australian people know that this coalition is focused on them. Thank you.
Thank you. OK, we'll go to questions. Phil.
Thanks, Rosemary. Can I ask, Jane Hume's not on the list at all. Did she ask not to be on the front bench, or has she just been relegated?
While I don't reflect on private conversations, I will say this, that these are tough days. And having been through many days like this myself in my parliamentary career, I recognise that. But what I do want to say about Jane Hume is she is an enormously talented, fantastic member of this team who has contributed amazingly over her political career, will continue to do so, and is a strong performer across a range of different subject areas.
Has she been punished out of personal vengeance for supporting Angus Taylor in the leadership vote? And how can you justify her not being in the front bench when you've got the likes of Alex Hawke and James McGrath who've been catapulted into cabinet? Have you just, has this been a bit of a get square, these appointments, has it been a get square process?
Absolutely not. I'm not going to reflect on the qualities of individuals with respect to the qualities of other individuals. I don't think that's a fair question, and I don't think the premise of it is reasonable. But what I will repeat is that, having spoken to every single member of my 54-member party room today, I know that we have harnessed the talent that we need in this shadow ministry going forward, but that there is a role for every single person. And opposition is not about hierarchies, it's not about structure, it's about getting every player on the field fighting the fight. Because this is not about the internals that you have just spoken of, this is about how we go out there to work hard for the Australian people. Mark.
Can I ask a question of each of you? First, you've put Jacinta Price into defence industry, which in government is a cabinet position, but she's not in shadow cabinet. Why is that? And Mr Littleproud, no position for Barnaby Joyce or for Michael McCormack. Are you picking a fight you can win?
I spoke to Jacinta yesterday about her new appointment. She's very excited to take it up. There is no more important area than safety, national security and defence, and you will see a great profiling of defence under Angus Taylor as we go forward in this term of opposition. And I'm delighted that Jacinta is taking up what is a really vital role, and her style of communication, her relationship with Australian people will be incredibly valuable.
This isn't about winning or losing, Mark. This is about the right thing. And I made it clear after the last election that I wanted to have generational change and continue to do that, and to nurture those new members that had come forward to draw on their skills, their diversity, and made it clear that was a journey that I was going to continue on. And I made the decision predicated on the future of the party. And I think both former leaders have the party at the core of who they are and what they are. This is about making sure that the course of our party room is one that is collegiate, is always brutally honest, which is a good thing, which is a great thing, that the Nats are prepared to put it out there and then go and have a steak and a beer. But this is about the future, and the future of our party and where we go for the next 100 years.
Mr. Andrew.
My question is to both of you. After last week's bitter breakup, how can voters be sure that this partnership will be sustained, given that you've come to this party room a bit like two parents who couldn't decide in a divorce who looks after the kids?
Well, Andrew, I don't accept the word bitter, and, people have used this breakup terminology. I agree that this is a professional partnership between two really strong parties in our Australian democracy that work very well when they work together. But personally, David and I will be friends. I think a woman who got her start in the shearing sheds of Western Queensland can always find something to talk about over a steak and a beer, David, with you, the person who represents those communities now. So we will 100% take this forward together. We will be stronger together, better together, and we can't wait to do this on behalf of the Australian people that we wake up every morning to fight for.
Because we've laid the boundaries, we've laid the foundation stones, and while there's been gossip and innuendo through the halls of the gallery, let me be clear. Sussan and I have always kept the lines of communication open. We've risen above that. We haven't let us get distracted by what's been reported. We've always made sure that this was the end goal. But there were principles that we talked about, and it took Sussan and the leadership that she took over to get her party room to that position. That took great strength. And I say not only to Sussan, but to her party room to understand that, and we reciprocate that. We know that this is a partnership, but what we have done today is set the foundation stones to say to the Australian people that we know who we are, we know where we're going, and we are focused on you.
Yes, ma'am.
A question to both of you. Individually and collectively, you both have a mammoth task ahead to get the coalition back to a competitive position. Ms Ley, nearly half your party room didn't support you in the leadership ballot, and Mr Littleproud, even today, there's people saying that you misled them in talks. Are you confident you'll both be standing here as leaders in 3 years' time?
I'm confident that we both will. And while people reflect on the votes and the conversations inside my individual party room, I know that everyone agreed in walking out of this party room not that many days ago to unite behind our leadership and to work very hard, because I am delighted to have in my party room people who are not there for the crisscross of the internal conversation, but are there for the big job. They're up for the big task of working hard to provide the opposition that this country needs, that it deserves, and that the millions of Australians that voted for us expect.
And happy to say, I respect Mr Boyce, but with respect of misleading the party room, it was very clear. The policies that he's talking about, gas, that was a coalition policy, one in which I actually have some concern about as well, because the gas that he talks about in Gladstone actually comes from my electorate, and there's a big pipeline that goes out that takes it. With respect to net zero, both sides have made it very clear that that was one of the policies in which we would review and look at our own respective organisations and what that might look like. The issue was about those four policies that were legacy policies of the party room.
That was. Should have told the party that you asked to be exempt from shadow cabinet.
Well, with respect in terms of a number of these conversations, that wasn't, and I've made this very clear on a number of occasions, this wasn't about a free-for-all around cabinet solidarity. There has been a number of occasions. One, if you go back to the AWB single desk decision, that was the first decision where the National Party broke away from cabinet solidarity some 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And as I've articulated around the voice, I wanted to make sure, and it wasn't a demand, it was a conversation, and Sussan was quite clear that the parameters that we have was ones that we should continue to adhere to. I wasn't asking for a free-for-all, and that was not something that I think was appropriate to share, the fact that it's been ruminated out here, because I don't want a free-for-all in my party room. I want to know that we respect the structures and processes that we have for 80 plus years. And so it was important that we set that down. I didn't want to see the relationship that I set back with Peter around the voice, that if there was something that we were comfortable with, then we would move towards about. Susan was very clear on that, and that's what I respect about. While you talk about the gossip, we talk about the facts, about the conversation.
Now over here, this side of the room.
Oh, thanks. Ms. Ley, 2 weeks ago, you stood here in your first press conference as leader and said, no policies on the table, no policies off the table. You needed to listen to Australians. Nuclear energy was a central pitch of the coalition in the last election, in which you were resoundingly voted out in a lot of seats. How can you stand here now and say that it's okay to have nuclear locked in as a policy when there hasn't been that review, that conversation, that listening with the public that you were talking about 2 weeks ago?
It's important to recognise that in agreeing, as we have, with respect to nuclear energy, that the removal of the moratorium is an important first step. It's also important to note that there will be development of the detail of any further policy with respect to nuclear after that point. So that's where we're starting, and the policy development that you speak of that does require that consultative engagement across our parties will continue.
Ms. Ley, 2 questions if I may. Just my quick read of this, it looks like there's 26 or 27 members in the Shadow Cabinet. Is that correct? And secondly, Claire Chandler, Sarah Henderson, Jane Hume dumped and Jacinta Price demoted for Conservative women. Why is that?
We have the same number of members in the Shadow Cabinet as the government has in the Cabinet. It's important to understand that that's where the link to the numbers is. I don't accept that terminology. This is a new parliament with a new leader, a fresh approach that I always sought to undertake and have undertaken. And looking back into the previous government, there were positions that people held, and they did extraordinarily good jobs in those positions. This is a new parliament with new people being elected and a new agenda moving forward. I am thrilled that I have so many terrific colleagues. And those that, as I said earlier, are not on this list are certainly incredibly valued and will continue to play that very, very important role that all of us must in opposition. We'll go to Sarah, sorry, and then to you, sir.
I just wanted to ask, what was the rationale for appointing Dan Tehan into Energy? And on that, you've made some comments about, we do need to get emissions down, but not at any cost. Will you consider dropping net zero over the next few months and at the start of this term?
We'll have those discussions inside the policy development process. Everyone would agree, and colleagues particularly, that Dan Tehan is an excellent appointment in this space. Dan has been a valued colleague over many, many years. I've known him for the last 25 years. What he brings to this is the detailed policy smarts, the ability to relate to a range of interests, stakeholders, sectors, individuals, communities, but an overriding determination, as we all have, that we do get this right. So I am looking forward to the really important piece of work that Dan is going to do, supported by Senator Dean Smith and consulting across our party rooms. Yes?
You've mentioned previously, of course, that your job is about modernising the Liberal Party, and a large part of this discussion is around making sure that women feel that they're seen in the party. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that there are no women in the economic sections. You've taken a woman away from the early learning portfolio, which is predominantly a feminised industry. Do you think, is this the final makeup of this modern Liberal Party that we are expecting?
This is a fantastic lineup. There's an assistant minister, incidentally, in the early learning area that will do a terrific job. And I know that everyone who speaks across the range of different portfolios will do so with an economic lens, because we do have to get the economic narrative right. And I just refer you to the outstanding mentions of the women who are stepping up in this lineup.
Just earlier today, this is a question for both of you, please. We've already had today Matt Canavan and Barnaby Joyce come out and say they'll agitate for net zero to be dropped from the backbench. In terms of reviewing that and getting to a final position on it ahead of the next election, how long does that take? And if it drags on, do you not think that'll sort of derail, if you've got this agitation from the backbench, will this not derail your attempts to have a stronger showing at the next election?
Well, I refer to David about those individual comments, obviously, but what I want to say is that one of the traditions that our parties share is the ability to speak freely on the backbench. It's not something you can do in the Labor Party. It's not something you can ever do in the Labor Party, but we value it, and we love the expression that people want to make about a whole range of different areas of policy, and that is one of them. So going forward, I have great confidence we will get this right.
Yeah, and in respect to that, as Susan's made very clear, each sovereign party formulates their own policies, and then we come together through the coalition process. We had a number of iterations in the last parliament around questions around net zero, and no doubt that'll happen again, but we'll put in place proper processes and structures to make sure that that diversity of ideas is put forward, and I think that's a good thing, that's a healthy thing, and I think what encourages me is the appointment of Dan Tehan. Dan's eminently sensible. He's a pragmatist, he's a realist, and he knows the real life experience of the lived experience of regional Australians and the impact of this all renewables approach that the Albanese government's going down. So we will obviously have our internal discussions as a Liberal Party, and then, as we've done for 80 years, we'll come together in a way that we can have that discussion in a mature, constructive manner. And that process is one that isn't about kicking down the road, but doing it right.
Yes, ma'am.
How many ministry positions do the Nationals have, and is that an adequate number in your view?
Yeah, it's always predicated on arithmetic. And so we've got 6 in the inner cabinet and 2 in the outer. Arithmetic has always predicated this. I think John Howard was famously said, politics is the brutal game of arithmetic, and that fits for the Liberal Party and the National Party, and that was a guiding principle from the start. It's been a guiding principle for many years. The fact that we had Napajimpa Price in the cabinet extra last time was around the fact that Julian Lesser resigned, and we needed to replace him. No, we've made it clear before. We were disappointed that Jacinta left us, but I was proud of the fact that we were the first to support her and the No Case, our party room. We got that cabinet position for her to give her that platform, but she has ambition beyond what my party room can give, and I don't think I should put my personal disappointment above somebody who has the ambition to have a higher office than what the National Party. I think I've got to be bigger than that and think about the country, and we wish her well in whatever endeavour she gets in terms of achieving that, but why should we put a ceiling on someone that has ambition?
Charles.
Just on that arithmetic, your colleagues have blamed the Liberal Party for losing 2 Senate seats over the last few weeks. Have you come to an agreement with either the Liberal Party or with the Prime Minister regarding the party status of the Nationals in the upper house, and do you hope for development there?
Well, we'll work through that, and I think there's some conversations in the Senate. I won't profess to be an expert on the operations of the Senate, but both Senate teams are working through that about making sure that there is a status that can be remained for the National Party, and I think there's constructive talks that Sussan and I had about making sure that remains, and I think that's been the conversations that's been happening. That while you've heard much of the gossip and the backgrounding, the reality is the real conversations were addressing these real problems.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a question on parliamentary culture. Today, Fatima Payman disclosed that she had made a formal complaint through the PWSS in regards to an older male colleague. I'm just hoping you can reflect, as the first ever woman of the Liberal Party, if you think there has been an improvement in parliamentary culture in the last few years, and if you would be pushing for greater mechanisms to make women, particularly women in your own party, feel safe in their workplace.
I read that report with great concern, and it is simply not good enough to have that behaviour take place in this building. Now, I was part of the formation of PWSS and a great deal of process in the last parliament that means that people in this situation have a place to go. But it is vital that reporting of events like this are a reminder to everybody that we must never take our eye off the ball when it comes to continuous improvement in the culture in this building.
Can I just clarify on net zero, Ms Littleproud? I think last week you said it remained National Party policy, and your deputy said that on the weekend as well. Are you now saying it is under review?
Well, in our culture of our party room, as it was in the last term and terms before that, members of our party room are free to come forward and to either bring new policy or challenge existing policies.
What's the existing policy?
We support net zero by 2050. That was the position we took to the election. And
is that the Liberal position as well? You still support net zero?
It's important, David, as I said, that we look at energy policy as a whole going forward. We have to play as a country our part in the global response to climate change. Net zero, Paris targets, gas, all of the resources, conversations around critical minerals, they're all part of that. We have to get this right. We have to play our part. but we have to make sure that we don't do it at any cost. So what I'm simply saying is, by doing the work that will be led by Dan Tehan, we will make sure that we reflect everyone's voice and the very real concerns that I know many Australians have, which is that you can't have an energy policy that crashes our energy grid. And you have to recognise the great manufacturing base of this country and is built on reliable, secure baseload power.
Just to follow up on that, can you explain why the energy portfolio has changed from energy and climate change to energy and emissions reduction?
Look, different governments give different titles, and at one stage there were so many titles on a minister that they couldn't fit on a business card in the days that we had business cards. I actually just look at the substance of what's going on and the policy areas and don't get hung up on the titles.
Mr Littleproud, are David Joyce and Michael McCormack being punished for speaking out on the coalition split?
No, I've made it clear when I became leader 3 years ago that I wanted to have generational change, but at that point wanted to respect the leadership that was before me, to allow them to impart their wisdom, their experience on the part of it in nurturing the next generation. And when you look at what Pat Conahan and Webster did in the last term, they put the shoulder to the wheel. Pat Conahan was a guy that came up single-handedly in support with Matt Canavan on our vaping policy. Drove it together, but they did the grunt work. And when you've got people like that with the calibre, I've got to continue to move forward. I know it's disappointing that people don't get positions, but it doesn't diminish their position in our party room. There's still people that are highly respected within our party room and we've drawn on, just in a different capacity. But you do have to look forward, and this is the tough decisions that Susan had to make, I had to make. They're not great conversations, but unfortunately they're ones you have to have sometimes.
Do you regret anything about the past week and a bit, Mr Littleproud, looking back from your actions from the get-go? Is there anything you'd do differently? And also, do you regret or have you apologised to Ms Ley for taking the speedy actions you took in the period when her mother was dying?
No, well, with due respect, we made sure Susan and I worked through that at a pace that she was comfortable with.
But your colleagues weren't even comfortable with the pace?
Well, with respect, I was working with the Liberal leader, who is the opposition leader, and I needed to respect the processes and the pace, as well as where we wanted to land in terms of getting an opposition ready. So we respected that all the way through. We were sensitive around that, so much so that I made, instead of asking Susan offered to fly back to Canberra to have our first meeting, I made it clear that I didn't want her to leave her mother's side.
With your language,
Last question, I think, with someone who hasn't had a question. Okay.
You have a new Shadow Minister for the Public Service and Government Services in James Patterson. Does this mark a new approach from the Coalition to the public service, and how would you characterise that?
I think it's important that we value the work that the public service does, but that in making policy around the public service, we consider all views and we consider the cost. So James Patterson is going to bring an incredibly bright, smart approach to the entire finance portfolio and be part of an economic team that really drives home an economic agenda that holds this government to account. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Well done, mate.
So that's a joint media conference there with the leaders of the Liberal and National